Now,
We can move the cable if you want to do that.
Mayor, I think it's okay to go back now to Shade Tree because
I think so, but first I would say, why don't we revise the order of the agenda, and then we'll do the Shade Tree, because we'll have a presentation, and then by the time we open it up for public comment, it should be close to 8:30. So could I get a motion to revise the order of the agenda to move from the assessment confirmation directly to ordinance introductions, minus, sorry,
Parking.
Linda, to do this to you, but minus the parking, and we'll do that last. And then to come back up, do the ordinance public hearings, and then we'll end the meeting with the parking. All right? Is there a motion?
I'll move that.
Okay. Is there a second? Seconded. So moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor of amending the agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So now we come to the ordinance public hearing, 2016-34, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning trees and shrubs and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And before we open up the public hearing, I'd like to invite up our arborist, Lorraine Konopka, and I know in our packets everybody received a proposed amendment from the Shade Tree Commission. So I don't know if somebody wants to present that to council, just so that's on the floor.
I think Lisa was prepared
Oh,
to do
Lisa
that.
can do it. I'm sorry.
I was actually going to...
Okay, that's perfect.
Since the original introduction was back in June? The 8th. July, I apologize. I wanted to make sure I just reviewed the procedural status, because there were actually... so the ordinance was first introduced, and since then, the public hearing was originally scheduled for August, and it's been carried to tonight. Between the introduction and the first public hearing, there were actually two very minor amendments proposed, but they hadn't been acted upon. So I just wanted to refresh your recollection, because you would have to vote on those as well tonight. And those are on the present copy that you have before you on pages 19 and 20. And if you look under C1, the last sentence where it says no contractor shall disturb the soil within a tree protection zone, that was not in the ordinance that was originally introduced. So that was new as of the August meeting. So, and that was not voted upon in August, so that would need to be voted upon tonight.
I'm sorry, I was pulling it up. So what was the...
Page 19, which is, let's see, and then under C1, the very last sentence in C1, where it says no contractor shall disturb the soil within a tree protection zone, that was not within the ordinance as introduced. So that was proposed for the August 8th meeting, but there was no vote on that. And the same language is on page 20 under letter C, the last sentence. It says no contractor shall disturb the soil within a tree protection zone. These aren't substantive changes. They just reiterate what's implicit in these requirements for the tree protection zones. So if these amendments were to be voted upon and approved tonight, they wouldn't slow down the adoption. The adoption could happen with these two changes tonight. But I just wanted to refresh your recollection that those amendments hadn't been formally acted upon. The more recent amendment was as a result of the Shade Tree Commission's recent meeting last week. As you know, there are significant concerns with the ash trees and the infestation by the emerald ash.
I'm sorry to stop you, but the minor amendments you just mentioned,
Yes.
we must have a pagination issue, because on my copy, and I just looked over at Ms. Butler's, both of them are on page 19, just FYI. There might be some kind of pagination issue with the copies we've got.
Okay, I probably copied a Word version. It probably wasn't the PDF. I'll make sure.
The sections line out in terms of
I'm sure it's just
the letters you gave.
the pagination, right?
But they're
Exactly.
both on page 19 in our copy.
C and D, right?
No, it's C in two different sections. It's
Get it.
C1, and then 10A, 7A, C.
I have it here.
That sentence occurs in both.
Now, that C's on 20 for me. It's page 20.
It's because you have that fancy machine.
Same one you have. But go ahead.
One of mine's on 18.
Yeah, well,
Well, I'll find it in the packet. Here we go. In the packet, the first change is on page 19, and it is C1, the last sentence in C1. It says no contractor shall disturb the soil within a tree protection zone. So that's on page 19. And then the second one on the packet that's on the website is on page 20 under C, the last sentence.
You're actually looking at the website right now?
I am.
Oh.
So
So was the website changed recently?
that one that changed.
this shouldn't have changed.
I downloaded
Wait,
it
well,
this afternoon.
let's move on.
Okay. So the third change, as I was saying, there are unique issues with the ash trees as a result of the infestation, an anticipated infestation in some areas of the emerald ash borer. And some of the concerns related to the ordinance as it was originally introduced, and there was concern that as currently drafted, homeowners would need a permit to be filed in order to remove an ash tree proactively and plant the replacement trees that are currently in Schedule A in the introduced ordinance, which they could be significant depending upon how many ash trees are removed. So instead of encouraging owners to wait until the trees meet the exceptions for the permit, such as for substantially diseased trees, the Shade Tree Commission wanted to be proactive and allow essentially a new exception where the Shade Tree Commission in these types of cases, such as with an ash tree and the emerald ash borer, where the Shade Tree Commission could petition council for a modified permit and tree replacement requirement. And what would happen was they would bring this to council and all of the evidence to support. And it would be done on a case-by-case basis. So for now, it would be the ash tree, but in the future, it could be another tree and a completely different pest infestation. So as drafted, this amendment would, again, allow this to be done at a public meeting where the Shade Tree Commission present all of this to council, and then council would reduce it to writing, and it would be ideally adopted after a public hearing by ordinance, so it gives the public ample opportunity to be involved in the process. So the guidelines will be approved by ordinance, and again, the purpose of this amendment is to put people on notice that this is a possibility, and it may very well happen in the future because of these unique situations with these trees and the pests that are infesting them. So that is the third portion of the amendments that was approved by Shade Tree Commission. And I will add that another option that was presented but rejected by the Shade Tree Commission was for a more specific provision to be added and an exception under the section that governs exceptions. It would be G, and basically would say that homeowners would not have to obtain a permit if they want to remove an ash tree due to actual or anticipated infestation due to the emerald ash borer. So there would be no permit required, no replacement trees required, and it would just be a pure exception under the ordinance. And that's just another way of handling the situation. Again, it was not recommended by Shade Tree Commission, but it had been discussed and presented, and it was just not the way that the Shade Tree Commission was interested in moving. But I wanted to give you that as some background, as an option. But there are also members of the Shade Tree Commission and the municipal arborists here to answer any questions and discuss any of the others.
So, sorry, so this isn't in this isn't, what you just mentioned is not included.
It is shown it's highlighted in yellow as a
One of the
proposed
versions.
amendment to the ordinance, but it has not been, it is not part of the ordinance.
yes,
So it would be
yes,
an
that's-
amendment to the ordinance, and
Okay.
it would be a substantive change. So it would require, you would have to vote on the amendment tonight, but if you approve the amendment, then the final vote on actual adoption of the ordinance would take place at a subsequent meeting.
So would that mean that we could reintroduce, I mean, it would be introducing it tonight?
Well, procedurally, it's akin to a reintroduction, but
Okay,
it's
that's what
not,
I'm-
it's not exact, it is similar because you have to publish notice again.
Okay.
And you have to have another public hearing.
Okay.
But technically, it is just amending the ordinance as
But
introduced.
we would only need one more hearing on it. I mean,
Absolutely.
I don't mean to say only.
Lisa, can you just take a step back to, because I know there's probably a lot of the public is here, not just for this one particular issue, but for the other aspects of the ordinance. And I know one of the points of confusion, and we have the whole ordinance in front of us tonight, which is very helpful, but what trees were exempt. And so if you have a tree that's sick or that's dead, that's treated differently than if it's a healthy tree. And if you could just go through that section so that there's clarity on that.
And this version of the ordinance includes the entire chapter 22, so it is easier to find these sections. So it's section 22:6. I'm sorry,
Yeah, it looks like 2212.
I'm thinking about
22.
2212. These are the exceptions. So the first is a tree that poses imminent danger to life or property, or where removal is in response to an emergency, such as a traffic accident where the tree is causing a major hazard. In that situation, there are some notice requirements included. Notification has to be provided to the enforcement officer soon after the removal of that tree takes place. But other than that, a permit does not have to be filed, and no replacement trees have to be planted. The next exception is for any tree that's fallen solely due to a result of storm damage or other natural causes, and there's no permit requirement for that, and there's also no notification requirement because it's already fallen, so there's no reason to do that. Remember, the public can always notify the enforcement officer. It's probably a good idea, but it's not required. The next exception is for a dead tree or substantially diseased tree as a result of natural causes or storm damage, where the tree is still standing. The person desiring to remove it is the owner of the land on which the tree is located. And again, it's another situation where the person has to notify the enforcement officer, and then the enforcement officer also verifies that the tree is dead or substantially diseased diseased as a result of natural causes. So the fourth exception is any application that is before the planning or zoning boards, and traditionally the tree removal, that's part of those applications. They do not go before the Shade Tree Commission, and the jurisdiction for those lies with the planning and or zoning boards. Any tree removal that's part of an application requiring preservation plan approval by the Historic Preservation Commission, that's another exception. And the last current exception is the removal of any trees that are part of an approved woodland management program pursuant to provisions of the New Jersey Farmland Assessment Act of 1964. So those are the existing exceptions.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Krummeler?
Well, I had a comment about this, and I wanted to ask the arborist, would a photo emailed from a resident of a dead tree suffice? Because it seems like if we encouraged that, it would save a lot of time of you having to go out to property to confirm that a dead tree is dead.
I do accept those now from time to time.
Uh-huh.
Only
You need to use the mic,
I
sorry.
mean, you have to trust the homeowner. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it might be a good trade-off for all the time it takes for you to have to go out.
Yeah, no, but sometimes, it's you have to build a trust with, I do have, there are some folks that I deal with on a regular basis where it's a certified arborist or it's a certified tree expert with a tree company, and they're sending in a lot of different things, and they're doing dead tree removals, and I have accepted, pictures of that.
Yeah.
But I don't think as a general rule across the board because, unfortunately,
So you see what I don't see, I'm sure. People
well,
trying to...
people will say they're only taking down one dead tree, but then they get rolling with the work, and they've got the men on site, and
Yeah.
they've got equipment humming, and tend to have some add-ons
Okay.
from time to time. Not
Okay.
always, but it's...
I was just thinking, because I was having a discussion with Ms. Butler about the expense of, and all the time it must take to go out and confirm dead trees, so I was, and I have a big
No,
dead
it-
tree in my front yard, so.
It adds up. It does. Yep.
Are there any other comments or questions from council before we open up to the public? Ms. Butler?
Yeah, Lisa, just to clarify, so we're really just talking about this paragraph under the exceptions as to how we'll go about creating exceptions? I mean, how we'll go about handling situations like the emerald ash borer, where we have an epidemic or natural disaster, infestation.
Correct. The way it's drafted, there would have to be a second ordinance to actually put into effect any provisions that will govern that specific tree and that specific outbreak. So this is just the procedure. It doesn't speak to the ash tree. You would have to actually address that by a separate ordinance. And it was also considered, originally, the idea was to do this by resolution. So I know that would be easier, but there was some discussion as well about the difference between a resolution and an ordinance, and how an ordinance has at least two public meetings before it is adopted, and that would give the public more opportunity to be involved. So that was what was...
Right, but it's sort of a double-edged sword because it takes a lot longer. And we had one meeting in August, so it's been a month since our last meeting. If we found ourselves in a situation where we wanted to act quickly and you needed to wait for 2 meetings instead of being able to pass a resolution to act upon something more immediate, it does take a lot longer.
Correct. But I think the council may change the language to provide that instead by ordinance, that where currently reads ordinance, it says by resolution.
Lisa, you might stress the fact that, or let me stress the fact that we did talk about the difference between doing this by resolution and doing it by ordinance. And it was the sense of the Shade Tree Commission that doing it by ordinance gave the Shade Tree Commission the opportunity to make the public aware on at least two different occasions that there was either something similar to the emerald ash borer or something similar to the Dutch elm disease that the municipality had to deal with, and that individuals, homeowners, would have to deal with also. So the intent was to try and get more transparency, more clarity, more information out to the public. I mean, the process could have been done administratively, and perhaps a press release given to the local papers, and they would run it. It could have been done by resolution. It could be done by resolution in one meeting, or as was recommended by the Commission, Shade Tree Commission, be done by ordinance, so that it would be discussed at ordinance introduction, and again at the voting of the ordinance, and perhaps by doing it on two separate meetings, there'd be more of an opportunity for the public to become aware of exactly what the issue was that the municipality was acting on in terms of an infestation or a disease that was affecting the trees.
Bernie, even if we acted by resolution, though, it wouldn't preclude the Shade Tree Commission from coming to council to talk, to make announcement or have public, forums. So just a thought.
Nor would doing it administratively preclude the Shade Tree Commission from coming before council and saying we've got a problem, similar to the Emerald Ash Borer problem. But doing it by ordinance raises it up a notch and perhaps gets a little more attention from our local media and a little more attention from the people who are really affected by the decisions that are made.
Can I just say one thing? I think part of our thinking also was by having this amendment be sort of generic and broad, and we'd have to come out and see and petition you and explain to you what we wanted to do. We're writing this in there so that it's going to carry into the future, so that right now we're dealing with emerald ash borer on ash trees. We didn't want to put something specific in the ordinance saying ash trees are exempt across the board, because we didn't want to promote the wanton slaying of ash trees across the board. So the idea is that we would allow the Shade Tree Commission to have flexibility in other issues that may come down the pike that could affect the rest of the stand of the trees, and also hopefully give it, work with developing plans with public to try and have them, work with their properties and not necessarily have a knee-jerk reaction and go after cutting down all the ash trees all at once. If we say ash trees are exempt because they're ash trees, we could see a drastic, we don't want to do something that's going to promote and, have people going after and cutting down every ash tree in sight just because it's an ash tree.
But if I could just push back on that a little bit, there seems to be no disagreement in the science that the emerald ash borer is coming, it's coming to Mercer County, and that it is 100% fatal. Like, every ash tree is going to get it, and every ash tree is going to die, right? I mean,
Unless you treat with a
unless you
chemical.
treat it.
Yes, unless you
But
do injections.
Right, unless you treat it. But to say the wanton slaying of ash trees, I mean, I do think reasonable people can choose, knowing that that tree that is in their yard is going to die at some point within the next 10 years. There are many reasons why somebody might choose to take the tree down sooner rather than wait for it to die. It can be a safety issue. They can be having other work done. It could be a cost issue. If you wait until every tree in town is distressed and you're competing with, the whatever number of tree removers we have in town, the cost might go up. There might be many, many reasons. And really, if they're going to die anyway, someone could argue, I can put up a replacement tree, and in 10 years, I'll have a nice tree, as opposed to waiting and you've got a deteriorating tree on your property. So I'm not sure we should be so judgmental about something that if we're all in agreement on the science and that it's 100% fatal, I'm not sure we should be making judgments about what people choose to do with a tree on life support.
Well, no one is saying that they can't take it down. We're not saying they can't take it down. We're just looking for commitment that trees will get replaced then. So that's the spot. So we have trees that are going to die. We have trees that are dead, and they don't require you don't have to pay for a permit, and you don't have to replace a tree for those trees. But if you cut down a live, healthy tree that's greater than 8 inches in diameter, you're expected to replace it with new trees.
But if it's an ash tree, it's not a lot.
Right, I understand that point, but I completely agree with Councilwoman Butler, and so I have two reactions to the proposed amendment by the Shade Tree Commission. I agree with the concept that the Shade Tree Commission should be able to come before council and request modifications to the Shade Tree Ordinance. However, having said that, they can already do that. The amendment is not necessary. The Shade Tree Commission and the arborist, and for that matter, any member of the public, can request an amendment to the ordinance. And if it's somebody other than the Shade Tree Commission, it would be referred to the Shade Tree Commission for comment under a normal process. But where we've landed is the right process, but it does not need to be inscribed as an amendment in the ordinance. And in fact, it seems to imply that without the amendment, you don't have the ability to do this, and that's not true. And that's actually a concern of mine, that we're implying that this power is simply reserved to the Shade Tree Commission and applies only to this ordinance, where we're much more open than that about this and all of our ordinances. So what I actually do prefer, and want to let my colleagues and the members of the public who are here know about, I prefer the alternate language that was very specific, that is in the, I think it's Ms. Maddox's memo, which would create a section G under the exceptions, any ash, Fraxinus spp, tree due to actual or anticipated infestation by the emerald ash borer, Agaricus penis, however you say that. I would prefer that amendment as, frankly, a separate amendment. And if there's a colleague up here who's willing to second it, I will move that whenever the time is appropriate to do so.
Well, I wasn't finished with my ash thought as far as replacement. So what my thought was, it's not fair to have, if we go with the new Schedule A, which is based on the DBH of the trees, and we know we are dealing with a big problem that we can't really fight, and that the ash trees are destined for infestation. People should still be, if they're cutting down live, healthy trees that are live and healthy right now, and you do the calculation using Schedule A based on the size, the diameter, and then they have to replant a small percentage of that. So they're not getting held to the new Schedule A with the larger trees having a value of 4 each. We have properties in town that are all ash trees, and if you let people...
I'm sorry, do we have that language now, or is that language you're proposing to add?
Schedule A.
Schedule A has already been modified for that?
Schedule A indicates the size of the DBA, the trees, and how many replacements go in.
I think what she's considering is she's calling a ash tree that is not showing any signs of infestation yet a healthy tree.
Yes.
And so if you wanted to take down a seemingly healthy ash tree, knowing that it is in fact not, that it will eventually die, you're held to the replacement standard if you don't...
Right, that's...
Right, and so my
we didn't
suggestion is
change
to have
the
it be a smaller, that the ash trees are not, that they can be a, not
and my
have the
question
same...
is-
Well, hold on,
that-
let's just let her finish, and then we'll come back.
But my question, I heard her suggestion. My question is that suggestion in the language in front of us? And I think the answer is no, right? That it would be a future
That
suggestion.
was going to be in the petition, that this amendment is just to actually present this idea and get this amendment in
Okay.
here regarding us coming to you with a petition. The petition would include the type of tree, the problem, and the replacement policy for that. So,
Right.
no, that is not specifically in there.
That was my question. Thank you. And I do understand that, and I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the Shade Tree Commission taking the emerald ash borer concerns and the potential cost of the homeowners under advisement. I do think that we're creating an overly complex solution to this, and the language in the memo, the alternate version G that I read earlier, is much simpler, more direct legally, and I would prefer that.
Okay, Ms. Howard?
It's just are we going to move to public comment?
I would like to, but if there's sort of clarifying questions from council, because then I want to have the public be able to
Respond to
give
that, yes.
input
So
to what council's going to be
So one
deciding
point
later.
that hopefully then public can also consider when they're commenting, Lorraine, sort of more posed as a question to you, is that one thing I think that so what you're proposing is that we hold off on adoption so that because the amendment is considered a substantial change, we have to reintroduce, and that delays adoption. And I guess just my only question to you is that so much work has gone into this, and it's really an impressive proposal, and I feel the pressure of time with what's going on around town with teardowns, but it's your sense as our arborist that even a short delay is worth it to make improvements like this. I guess that's my question for you, because I had been looking forward to us moving, and that this was an important action to be taking, given how fast things are happening in town with teardowns. And I know from having talked to you how much of your time is being spent going around town okaying trees coming down because of teardowns. And so further delay is going to mean more time for that kind of activity. But I guess I'm asking you that, as part of the deliberations, was that weighed, and it's still the recommendation that these changes are important to make, and even though it means delaying?
I think the delay seems like it's going to be a month. I mean, at this point, I've been here a year and a half.
I've seen 2 houses
you
go up in
know,
my neighborhood in the last month,
And we've
right?
been working on it. We've only actually gotten to actually open, discuss the whole ordinance in the last 2 months here in this place. So I think waiting one more month to try and figure it out and make everyone be comfortable with it. I will say, though, that I just did a count today, and as of today, there's been 317 tree removal permits, and I expect there to be 920 new trees planted in town. That means that since January 1st, 920 live, healthy trees over 8 inches have been cut and removed from town. That's probably a few ash trees in there since the word broke out, but a lot of trees are getting removed around town, a lot of large trees.
Wait, do you have past year numbers? Can you do?
Pardon me?
Do you have numbers from past years, how that compares?
Yes. I've only been here a year and a half. I mean, I guess we could dig them up and start
Actually,
doing that kind of
We
thing.
do, and I think it was the July 19th memo.
You had talked about how many, it seemed a dramatic
I think it
increase,
was
right?
2015, 400, their applications, it was 458 applications were processed, and as of May 11th this year, it was 121 applications, but
It's been a busy summer.
yeah, you're looking...
So, my point only being for the public is that we are weighing the importance of moving, that my preference often is you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and we could keep debating this all fall to get it perfect, but in the same time, how many trees would we have lost in that interim? So I think that's the balancing test we have to, and I'm comfortable with these changes, but I wouldn't want to see that be, allow us to slack off more than another meeting or whatever it would take us to tie them up.
Ms. Cremor?
Yeah, along the same lines, I mean, what Patrick said made sense about the yellow section. And if that is the case, that it's really not giving us any new power or changing anything. So could it be not considered a substantial change?
Good question, but I think my only concern with not considering it substantive is that it does set forth at least some policies and ideals, I think, of council in including it in the ordinance. And what it's saying is that in these instances, there's a real possibility that there could be modifications to the permitting and the replacement tree schedule, essentially on a case-by-case basis, as long as it's done by ordinance. So it's setting forth a procedure for dealing with these cases. So in that respect, I think it is.
Okay.
I agree with you, because that was my thought as well, as I go back and forth. But
But what about if we took this language and adopted it as a resolution, separate from this ordinance? Because then it's there, it's saying that what we all think is important, and it's laying out the process that we plan to do it, but it's not in the ordinance. Since I think that was a good point, that it's not really it's more talking about us doing another ordinance. It's not really.
so if you take it out and you basically include this in a separate ordinance.
As a separate resolution.
I'm sorry, a separate resolution, then this is your preferred process. It's not necessarily binding. You can change it again. But the important part would be that in the future, those changes and modifications be approved by ordinance, a separate ordinance.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. We would adopt a resolution saying they would be changed by ordinance. It's just almost exactly this.
The only difference would be if you change this to be done by resolution, then you would absolutely need this language in the ordinance, because you need to...
No, I'm not talking
that's not what...
I'm not talking about changing. I'm saying that our resolution would say we plan to change the ordinance, or it would say exactly this.
Absolutely. That accomplishes essentially the same goal, and it keeps it out of the ordinance, and it allows you to vote whether or not you want to adopt the ordinance tonight.
Okay. Thank you for that suggestion. If there's no other pressing questions from council, I want to open it up to the public hearing. Yes, Mr. Simon?
We have quite a few people who are here to comment on the ordinance, so I wanted to just very briefly, I'm not going to try to belabor the points that I spent quite a lot of time on in August, but just very briefly point out a few things, because I have several concerns about the ordinance. One is I think that there are several prudent tree management practices that the ordinance actually impedes for the average homeowner. It makes it more expensive, including you've got trees that are old and should be removed, you've got trees that are too crowded, you've got invasive species, or you've got an ash tree, which should be removed. All of those are made more expensive for the average homeowner. I'm completely on board with the goal of not allowing clear cutting. I just think that we can do it in a way that is more amenable to the average homeowner than this proposed ordinance provides. Second concern I have is we're changing the approval period from 3 to 4 weeks, but one of our goals on council this year is to improve customer service. We're going in the wrong direction on that. The third thing is outside of the scope of what the Shade Tree Commission should consider, but which frankly the council and the community should consider. There are other public goods that are at odds with this ordinance. For example, being able to put up solar panels on your home. There's no exception to allow for that, but that is, in climate change, that's a better change to make than leaving a tree up, putting solar panels on your home. A second exception, which I was told by Ms. Maddox used to exist in the township and then was removed, I don't know why, was basically for an overriding requirement or need of a homeowner, for example, installing a wheelchair access ramp. If you need to remove a tree to do that, there's no permission to do that in the current ordinance. I have no idea why. It seems to me that we're a little bit upside down on priorities, and actually the existing ordinance requires imminent danger as one of the exceptions. And again, I think that's upside down on priority. I think it should be some kind of a more modest statement of risk to health or safety or property than what we've got in our existing ordinance. And that's not dealing with the amendment, that's the existing ordinance. But again, I think it points to us being a little bit upside down on our priorities. So I have several concerns with the ordinance and with the amendments. And I've already said that I prefer to explicitly allow the ash trees to be removed directly.
Butler, did you have a comment?
Yes, I also want to support the idea that I would like the ash trees removed as well, the exemption for the ash trees, knowing what we know and given that there's no dispute about that. And I wanted to ask Mr. DeShield whether staff or maybe Bob Huff, Lorraine, you can weigh in on the magnitude of the problem. I think you were here for the excellent presentation that the Shade Tree Commission did. And if permitting is required and if for ash trees, and if our arborist wants to visit every property and make some determination about replacement, et cetera. I mean, as far as I know, Lorraine's working about as hard as she can work. We don't have excess capacity, and we're layering on basically, a natural disaster on top of this. I'm not sure that we actually have the manpower to do this unless we're willing to commit, if we are going to require permitting and inspection of every ash tree that's taken down. I think we have to be realistic about what that's going to cost us.
In terms of just the manpower, and I know the Shade Tree Commission and the arborists have been looking at the issue, I don't have a kind of magnitude of what the problem will look like moving forward, what the manpower would be. We're kind of looking at that process moving forward with the budget, so I don't have an answer to your question. But it will be a problem we will have to deal with.
I have a question about that. So the fees that are raised here, can some of those be used if we need to hire an additional person to help, or are those funds restricted?
We're not charging a fee for the ash trees, right? My understanding is we would not be charging a fee for the ash trees, and I would agree with that because, homeowners are already bearing quite a large cost of removing the ash trees.
The fees go into the trust reserve, which the monies in that reserve are supposed to be used for planting and maintaining trees in the public right-of-way. So only to the extent that a new staff member would be working on that specifically.
Unless we amend the ordinance further to allow for that. So I guess I have a process question. I've indicated I would like to introduce an exception G, which is the one written in the memo. Does it matter whether I do that now or after public comment in terms of process? And I want to introduce it as a separate amendment, not as a part of the omnibus amendment.
I believe it should be after the public hearing.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I would like to open up the public hearing. Have people been signing up the sheet that